When people think about Taurus, they often imagine a rhythm of life that moves a little slower than most, more practical, more reserved, like someone walking without hurry on a road where everyone else seems eager to rush ahead. Yet, when you stay a moment longer, when you sit still enough to really observe, what appears does not always match the first impression. Taurus rarely talks much about what's going on inside. They live with thoughts that are very small, very human. A morning routine, a familiar feeling while sitting in a quiet room, a moment of waiting without knowing exactly why patience came so naturally. Not everyone notices these things. Sometimes even Taurus themselves cannot quite name the qualities they carry with them each day. This story is not meant to explain or define anything. It isn't trying to prove a point. It's simply a gentle slice of life, like looking again at someone you've known for a long time and suddenly realizing there are things that were never spoken out loud. And from here, those quiet qualities begin to show themselves, very slowly, very naturally. Taurus does not rush, not because they lack decisiveness, but because they need to understand where they are standing on the road they're on. Their pace is usually a little slower, like someone walking in the early morning when the streets are still quiet and the nightlights have not fully faded yet. In moments like that, everything becomes clearer, sounds grow softer, thoughts lose some of their noise. Taurus often chooses to pause in places like these, not to hesitate, but to feel what the ground beneath their feet is telling them. Those moments of observation happen quietly. No plans written down, no declarations made, just ordinary habits of daily life. Looking one more time before turning, sitting still for a few extra minutes before deciding, resting a hand on the doorknob before opening the door, as if every next step needs a quiet agreement from within. People around them may not notice this. Some may even misunderstand that slowness. But anyone who stays close long enough will see Taurus gathering very small details. A glance, a feeling without a name, a passing memory, all of it carefully collected to form a picture that belongs only to them. In everyday life, this shows up in simple ways. After work, they choose the familiar route instead of the shortcut, not because they fear change, but because the old road gives them time to think all the way through. Streetlights come on one by one, the heartbeat slows, and in that quiet space, an answer appears naturally. Not a clear solution, just a sense of which direction feels easier to breathe in. Taurus observes people the same way. They do not press with questions. They do not rush anyone forward. They listen with their eyes, with their presence. An unfinished sentence. A silence that lasts a little longer than expected. Things that seem meaningless to others are carefully noted by them. Like a small flame in the kitchen, burning steady and warm, never flaring up to draw attention. Because of this, when Taurus moves forward, they rarely find themselves carried too far away from what truly matters. That experience can sometimes make them feel different in a world that's used to moving fast. Yet, it is that slower rhythm that creates a strength uniquely their own. Not strength without movement, but strength that comes from looking closely before placing the next step. And when the next door finally opens, Taurus steps through quietly, carrying a steady confidence built from years of silent observation. That sense of certainty is never loud. It doesn't need to be seen. It feels like leaning back into a familiar chair in a quiet room, knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be, even while everything outside keeps moving. Taurus often walks with that feeling inside, like solid ground beneath their feet. Not something they think about all the time, but something that's always there. Beneath that calm exterior lives an inner world far deeper than most people realize. Their thoughts don't arrive like crashing waves, but like slow-moving water beneath a still lake. During the day, the surface looks smooth, aimed not to hold on, just to understand that these things once existed, and that they still hold meaning somewhere inside. Taurus is careful about what they choose to say, not out of fear of being misunderstood, but out of respect for their inner quiet. Some emotions lose their wholeness if spoken too soon. Some thoughts only need to be kept, like a small flame burning warm in the corner of a room. No extra fuel needed, no attention required. That's why Taurus silence is never empty. It's full, just in a way that's entirely their own. Those who stay close long enough begin to feel it. A very gentle sense of ease, like sitting beside someone in silence and realizing nothing more needs to be said. That deep, quiet inner world creates space for others to breathe more slowly, to let conversations unfold without urgency. Yes, and in that stillness, the most important things often find their own way to remain. They don't need to be held tightly. They don't require promises. They stay because they fit that rhythm of life. Like a familiar object that's been sitting on the table for so long you've forgotten why you chose it in the first place. Taurus lives alongside things like that. Not clinging loudly, not letting go easily either. Just choosing, almost without thinking, the same way they chose yesterday and the day before that. Taurus consistency rarely looks like a grand act of determination. It doesn't come from vows or clearly written goals. It shows up in choices that are small, very human. Waking up at a familiar hour. A cup of coffee made exactly the way they like it. A familiar road, even if it takes a little longer. These choices repeat, day after day. They don't draw attention, but over time, they form a rhythm of life where Taurus feels at ease. Sometimes, people on the outside wonder why they don't change more, why they don't try something new. But a closer look shows that Taurus isn't afraid of change. They just don't change on impulse. Each small choice is kept long enough to see whether it truly fits, like standing under an awning during a light rain, not rushing away, not rushing to stay, just noticing whether it feels comfortable there. That steady persistence carries Taurus through many phases without letting them be swept away. When everything around them shifts, they still have places to return to. An old habit, a familiar value, a steady sense of who they are. Not because they fear losing these things, but because they remind them of themselves when everything else begins to blur. And from those small, repeated choices, Taurus builds something solid beneath their feet. Not a foundation meant to impress anyone, but one strong enough to stand still when needed, and to move forward when the time feels right. Within that ordinary rhythm lives a quiet strength, steady enough to carry them farther without ever needing to rush. And as they move forward on that foundation, Taurus carries emotions with a rhythm of their own, quiet yet enduring. From the outside, they may appear calm, sometimes even a little distant. But inside, their emotions are never shallow. They're like glowing embers beneath ash, not bright, not loud, but holding warmth for a very long time. Taurus rarely reacts right away. Faced with a comment, a situation, or an unexpected change, they tend to stay quiet a moment longer. Not because they don't feel it, but because emotions need time to settle into the right place. Like standing by a window on a quiet evening, watching late-night lights reflect on the glass. They allow feelings to pass through them slowly, carefully, without disturbing what's steady inside. Things that touch Taurus often stay longer than people expect. A sentence that seems small can linger for days. A warm moment, even a brief one, can become a place to rest during times of fatigue. They don't hold on intentionally. They remember through sensation, not through words. Those emotions blend into everyday life, showing up in the simplest moments. Making a familiar cup of coffee, pausing at a familiar intersection, in sitting quietly in a room with nothing but the sound of a ticking clock. Sometimes, even Taurus is surprised to realize the feeling is still there after so much time has passed. Not lingering sadness, not exactly joy, just a soft but distinct imprint, like a trace of scent left in the air after a door has already closed. It doesn't stop them from moving forward, but it slows their pace by a single beat, long enough to listen to what the heart might be asking for. That enduring emotional depth helps Taurus form bonds that run deep, even when they are never put on display. When they care, it doesn't rise into grand declarations. It spreads through steady presence, sitting beside someone in silence, remembering a small detail others forgot, keeping a commitment even when no one reminds them. And these gestures come from feelings that have settled deep, stable enough to need no proof. And then, in the most ordinary moments, when the lights in the room grow dimmer, when the familiar road home comes into view, Taurus realizes that emotions don't need to be loud to matter. They only need to remain long enough, true enough, to let them keep moving forward with a heart that stays warm in its own quiet way. And it is that quiet warmth that allows Taurus to endure many things without needing to speak them out loud. Not the kind of endurance that tightens the jaw and forces one step after another, but a softer form of acceptance. Like someone standing under a porch during a light rain, not rushing away, not blaming the sky, just waiting calmly for the rain to thin out on its own. In everyday life, these Taurus often carries more on their own than people realize. When something happens, the first instinct is rarely to look for someone to unload everything onto. Instead, they pull inward for a moment. That quiet space feels like a still room where everything can be set down on the floor, looked at one by one, and slowly sorted. What should be kept? What can be let go? No one witnesses that process. No one is warned that it's happening. There are periods when Taurus moves through immense pressure while the outside barely changes. They still go to work. They still finish what needs to be done. They still keep their familiar routines. Like a small flame in the kitchen, no matter how strong the wind outside the window, it keeps burning steadily in one corner, hot enough to cook what's needed. Others may not notice anything at all, and because everything looks so ordinary. Yet it is that very ordinariness that keeps them from breaking apart. This endurance does not come from believing they must be strong. It comes from a simple trust that emotions can be carried as long as they are not allowed to sweep everything away. Taurus is used to placing one step ahead, then another, even without knowing how long the road might be. Each step is not heavy, just firm enough to keep from slipping. Only when looking back does Taurus suddenly realize how much has already been crossed. On a late evening, when the room is quiet enough to hear their own breathing, they might pause and think that they carried all of this without ever calling it a burden. The feeling is not quite pride, and not regret either, just a gentle recognition. They like placing a hand on the chest and noticing that the heart is still beating steadily. This ability to endure in silence helps Taurus remain whole over time. Not always happy, not always steady, but still standing in a way that belongs only to them. And within that silence lives a very real strength, unspoken, unmarked, quietly carrying them forward day by day, step by step, until everything gradually begins to feel lighter. And after moving through those heavier stretches of the road, the way Taurus stays with people and situations around them begins to show a very particular shape. There are not many promises spoken, no need for words that sound reassuring on the surface. For them, connection does not live in what is said, but in being present, consistently, even when no one asks for it. My Taurus often shows loyalty through very small actions, remembering a detail that seemed unimportant, keeping a shared habit exactly as it was, showing up on ordinary days, not only during moments of intensity. These things don't leave a strong first impression, but when placed together over time, they create a deep sense of trust, like an old chair in a familiar home, not new, not remarkable, but always there when it's time to sit down. Speaking less promises allows Taurus to keep their energy focused on what they can truly sustain. When they choose to stay, that choice has usually been considered quietly for a long time, and once they stay, they bring their full presence with them, not halfway. Not only when things feel easy, they remain even on days when no one is paying attention, when everything feels as though it has paused. Some relationships last, not because so many emotions were spoken aloud, but because someone kept showing up through each season. Taurus is often that person. They don't make everything bigger than it needs to be. They don't leave when emotions rise and fall. They stay by keeping the shared space from breaking apart, like keeping a small flame in the kitchen from going out, sometimes with nothing more than a few familiar gestures. That kind of loyalty is quiet, and at times, it goes unnoticed. But for those who recognize it, it brings a sense of ease that lasts a long while, knowing there is someone who doesn't need reminders, doesn't need to be checked on, and still chooses to stay in the most complete way they can. And from that steady presence, connections deepen over time. No affirmations required, as just continuing to walk slowly together on the same road. And when someone walks beside Taurus long enough, a feeling begins to take shape, one that's difficult to name, not excitement, not intensity. Just a very gentle sense of reassurance, like knowing the porch light is still on, even though it's already late. Taurus carries that steadiness naturally, without trying to create it, without needing to explain it. Their presence tends to slow the space around them. Conversations feel less rushed. Decisions don't need to be made right away. It's like stepping into a quiet room where the noise outside is left at the door. Others may not notice it immediately, but the body does. Breathing slows, shoulders drop. Thoughts stop racing so far ahead. Taurus doesn't try to reassure anyone with words. They do it by keeping things at a human scale, not exaggerating the problem, not minimizing someone else's feelings, just being there, listening, not leaving before the story has found its way through. At times, that presence alone is enough to remind someone they don't have to manage everything by themselves. In everyday life, this sense of safety shows up in very small details, a timely reminder, a familiar routine kept in place so no one feels out of step, a known space maintained even as everything else shifts. Taurus creates stability the way a familiar road leads home. No large signs needed, just feet that already know the direction. They may not even realize they're doing this. For Taurus, keeping things from falling apart is a natural response, like placing another piece of wood in the stove before the small flame fades. That steadiness doesn't promise anything, but it allows others to lean in for a moment, or for longer. And in a world that's always changing, the sense of safety Taurus brings becomes rare. It doesn't come from knowing everything will be fine. It comes from knowing someone is still there when things are not fine yet. That steady presence makes it easier to breathe for anyone walking beside Taurus, enough to keep moving forward, even when the road ahead still feels long. And on stretches of the road like these, Taurus often carries something very personal, something not easy to see, yet always present. These are the values they chose early on, kept through time, through friction, even through moments of doubting themselves. Not grand beliefs meant to be spoken out loud, but quiet principles that shape how they live each day. Taurus does not change their values simply because circumstances shift. They may adjust how they move, but they rarely abandon the direction they've chosen. Like a familiar road that gets repaired, that may require slowing down, yet still leads to the same place. These values are tested through experience, through an inner sense of what feels right, not through advice or passing trends. There are things Taurus holds on to because they make them feel like themselves. A way of working, a way of treating others, a very small principle that is not easy to compromise. They cannot always explain why. They only know that when they try to let go, they feel more unsteady than before. So they keep these things, not out of stubbornness, but to avoid losing that inner sense of balance. At times, as these values cause Taurus to move more slowly than others. Sometimes they choose not to step onto a path that seems easier, simply because it doesn't align with what they believe is right. That decision is quiet. It doesn't need to be understood. Just a private choice, like turning the car around on an empty road at night after realizing you've gone too far from where you meant to be. This deep attachment to personal values helps Taurus stay grounded when everything around them is changing. While others are still searching for something to stand on, they already have familiar ground beneath their feet. Not to remain there forever, but to know where they are standing before taking the next step. That feeling brings a genuine calm. Not because things turn out as expected, but because they have not abandoned themselves. There are moments when Taurus wonders whether they might be too rigid, but in quieter hours, when the room is lit softly and the noise of the day has settled, they realize those values are still giving them direction. No need to be fast, only not to lose the way. And it is that quiet commitment that allows Taurus to keep moving forward with a very particular feeling. Not certainty about the future, but a steady sense of ease, knowing that even as the road remains long, they are still walking alongside the things that matter most to them. And along that journey, Taurus often notices the smallest things, sometimes so small that others pass right by without ever seeing them. A familiar sound at the end of the day, a trace of scent drifting through a quiet room, the way the air changes when the lights are turned on later than usual. These details touch Taurus lightly, like a breeze, yet stay with them for a long time. Taurus experiences the world through senses like these, not to analyze, not to assign grand meaning, just to feel. Moments that seem ordinary at first can become quiet pauses for Taurus, places where they slow down by a single beat and realize they are fully present. Like standing on a familiar street, listening to the steady rhythm of their own footsteps. This sensitivity draws them closer to simple things. A warm cup of tea in the evening, soft light in the room before sleep. A silence that sits comfortably between two conversations. Things that don't need to be spoken, yet when they're gone, something feels noticeably empty. Taurus keeps these details the way one keeps small fragments of life, piecing them together into a very personal sense of calm. Perhaps that's why Taurus carries a certain depth in their pace, not because they move slowly, but because they stay long enough inside each moment to truly feel it. And when everything quiets down, those small details become anchors, reminding them that life is shaped not only by major turning points, but also by the softest moments. When thinking about Taurus, it may be enough to ask quietly, in the middle of busy days, how long has it been since you paused to notice a small detail right beside you? A familiar sound, a familiar feeling, or a moment of silence warm enough to stay in a little longer. And perhaps within those very small moments, each person's story is still unfolding, quietly, in its own way.